Hi stamping friends, thanks so much for being here with me today. I'm Anna Helman, and today I want to help you look at some techniques in a new way. I know you love to learn new techniques, and today we're going to be combining several to help you really see the possibilities of using some of the products in your collection. We'll start with some embossing folders. We'll do some heat embossing, some watercolor, a few other techniques to really help you see what you can do with those folders in your collection. Let's get started. We are going to be starting with a piece of cardstock that I have embossed with the Whimsical Woodland embossing folder. We're actually going to do two different samples. So this is my first one that we'll do. Then I'll show you some different techniques with the second one, which is going to be a leaf embossing folder. I know I just love leaf projects, and many of you do as well. Now on this one, I have used shimmery white cardstock. For the techniques we're going to be doing, I really love to use the shimmery white cardstock. It's a little bit smoother. The ink doesn't absorb into it quite as fast, which will allow us to do some things a little bit different. Now you can do this on regular cardstock as well. What I want to do first, this is a technique I shared a video about a while back that I called double embossing. We could call it embossing squared, but basically we are embossing on top of embossing. So I have my Versamark ink pad here. I am going to very gently apply this over the top of my embossed piece of cardstock. I want to be very, very gentle because anywhere that I only want to apply the ink to those raised places. Now, likely I will probably get some of this ink in the lower places, and we'll talk about what to do about that here in a second. Now I'm going to apply my embossing powder to this. Now, I always forget when I'm recording to do things that I should do. I should have used my embossing buddy first to remove static from my cardstock. So I highly recommend running that over the top of your project. We do have one of these available. I've also shared a video on how to create your own if you're interested in that. So I am going to pour my embossing powder over the top. Now this isn't going to look like a lot at first because I'm using white embossing powder, but as we go along, you will be able to see what we are creating and the look I am going for with this. Give it a good flick on the back to get that extra powder off. And this is the time to check and see if you have any extra powder in places you don't want it. You can use a brush. This comes as a part of that kit with our embossing buddy. You can use a brush to remove those extra pieces. This brush is really good for larger areas. If you have smaller areas you need to get it off of, you can also just use a little tiny paintbrush. So any places we have this left, it will show up at the end, which is okay. On my second sample we'll look at, you'll see some of that, and I'm okay with it. This does not need to be perfect. So now I'm going to heat set this with my heat tool, and I will be right back. Now, I can already see here that I did not get perfect coverage on my embossing. So with this technique, you have to realize it probably will not be perfect, but what I'm going to do, I am going to try that one more time and go back over it with my Versamark. I'm going to go a little bit, press a little bit harder this time, especially on the couple of trees I see that I did not get very much. We'll try this one more time and see what happens. So I can already tell I got much better coverage this time. I did get some extra powder in some of the areas in between the raised parts. You'll be able to see that here in a little bit more as we add some color to this. But you could do this several times and it will really add up and build that texture to those raised parts. So let's get started with our next step. We are going to be using water painters to add color to these trees. I thought it would be really fun to add some fun and bright colors to these trees. So I have Polished Pink, Highland Heather, and Bermuda Bay inks. What I'm going to do is pick up some of that color onto a block. I think I have some extra embossing powder on my work surface here, so if you can see that, I'm going to need to clean afterwards. Okay, I have some of those inks. What I like to do is squirt a little bit of water over here with my water painter. I can mix it up so I have areas of lighter color, and then as I get over here, usually I get into the darker areas. And I am just going to apply this color into those open areas. Now, if I get it onto the raised areas, that's fine. I'll be able to remove that with a paper towel or napkin or tissue. So we're going to spend a little bit of time here doing some coloring, which is always fun. And this is where, as I do this, it's going to be a little bit like magic because these trees are going to start to come to life. So I'll do several of these trees. This is the Bermuda Bay color, and I'll spread these out so that we get different colors in different places. Thought this would be just a really fun way to use this embossing folder. Now, this tree that I'm doing right now, there on that top section that I already did, you can see where the embossed image isn't perfect. That's where I got some of that extra embossing powder onto the flat area where I didn't really want it, but it happened, and that is okay. As it comes together, I think what we will find is that this turns out beautifully, even though it isn't perfect. I know a lot of times I look at something on a project that isn't perfect and I think, oh, that looks terrible, but I just keep creating. I usually just keep going with it. And as time goes on, usually by the time I get done, then I don't even notice that part that wasn't perfect to begin with. So try that out if you get hung up on things that don't go the way you want and don't look the way they want. And oftentimes, mistakes lead to some of my best creations, honestly. So maybe you can say the same yourself with some of your projects. So I think I'm almost done with this color, and then we'll start adding some of those pinks and purples, which I think will be really fun. Here, I'll do this. And what's nice about this, using a water painter is kind of carefree anyway, because if you go outside the lines, it's watercolor. It's, you know, it's not supposed to be precise. But especially with this, you have those embossed areas that are a kind of a boundary for your color. So this is even more carefree than in most cases when you have stamped your outlines. So let's add some of this Highland Heather in. I will finish this up and be back in a second. Okay, I think I am done with my coloring here. So here you can see where now we have those white outlines that really stand out with the dry embossing from our embossing folder, and then the heat embossing put on top of that. Now we are going to take this another step further. So I'll clean up here for a second. And this next technique I'm going to use is one that I just got this puff paint in, that it's Snowfall Accents puff paint, and we can apply it and then we heat it up with our heat tool again, and it is going to puff up like snow. It's really cool. So if you use this, and if you're interested in any of the products I'm using today, I'm shaking it if you can hear that. If you're interested in any of these, I'll have links and everything in the video description below, all the products I'm using. So what I want to do with this, I am just going to apply this to certain parts of the tree. And you want to keep in mind that if you apply this over ink, it is very possibly going to pick up the color from that ink. So I am going to place this around the right edges of my trees as if the snow has kind of built up over here on the right side in a lot of places. And then I'm going to heat this up with my heat tool. And hopefully you will be able to see, I don't know if you'll be able to see it while I'm heating it, but it is really cool how it puffs up. And it doesn't necessarily puff up perfectly even. It's kind of a rough puffing. And it looks really, at first I wasn't sure what I thought, but then I thought, well, that looks a lot more like real snow than if it puffed up perfectly evenly. So I'll get this last little bit applied, and now let's start to heat this up and see what happens. So here I have used my heat tool. I heated up that puff paint, and hopefully you can see some of these areas that it has raised up and puffed over here along the right edges of my trees. It did pick up a little bit of that ink, so like I said, that's something you need to keep in mind. It may pick up some of your ink if you apply it on top of ink. And as you can hopefully see, it's really puffy and not quite even, which, like I said, it took me off, it caught me off guard at first. I was surprised, but I really like the way it looks. Now, if you want to see the completed card, stick around until the end. I want to show you my second project here now, and this one is going to probably come along a little bit quicker. This I created with the Leaf Fall embossing folder, and I did this on watercolor paper. And so we're going to do a little bit different version of watercolor this time. But I very, very gently applied my Versamark ink pad over the top. On this one, I was very careful to keep the pad just here in the leaf area. I knew if I started applying it over here on the edges that I was going to have ink all over the place over here in the blank space. So I was very careful to keep it just in that area with the leaves. And you can see it didn't get 100% coverage, but I'm totally okay with that. And I think we're going to end up with a beautiful completed card anyway. Now for this one, I am going to bring in 3 different colors: Blackberry Bliss, Merry Merlot, and Cajun Craze. I will apply these to an ink pad just like I did for the last one, but this one we're going to do differently. This one we are going to watercolor that entire background. And I'm going to use a different aqua painter. So my aqua painters came in a set of 3, a small one, a medium one, and then this larger brush tip. So apply some water to the blocks. We'll mix this up, and gosh, it has been a little while since I've shared any watercolor like this in my videos, I feel like. This is a technique that I absolutely love, and I could probably do this in all of my videos if I didn't think that I would bore you to tears doing it. So I want to make sure I have plenty of water. You can actually spritz the background of your card if you like. You can spritz it to make sure that when you apply the colors to it, that the color in the water is going to flow a little bit better. Watercolor is something you just have to play around with and figure out what likes for you. There's no right or no wrong. There's 1.5 million ways to do it. Trying to get my extra color off here so that I can move on to, let's do Merry Merlot next. You could do this same card, the same project with the same embossing folder and do different colors. If you don't want it to look like fall, you could use greens or blues or browns or any color you like, but the one I'm doing definitely looks fallish. Fall is one of my favorite times of year, and I thought this would be a beautiful project using this embossing folder. I'll apply a little bit more of this Mary Merlot, and then we'll move on to one of my absolute favorite colors of all time, Blackberry Bliss. You all should tell me. I tell you all the time. So those of you who follow along, you should comment and tell me what my favorite color is. It may or may not be on this project. Okay, let's move on to some Blackberry Bliss. And what's fun about watercolor is even once the color is applied, it is not permanent. You can go back in, you can just add water, you can add more color, you can spritz it with water, you can do a lot of things and get those colors to move and flow. That's why I wanted to use the watercolor paper on this one. Now you could do this technique with that shimmery white cardstock I used on my last project. You could do it with regular cardstock. Just keep in mind the colors are not going to move and flow as well as they are on what I'm doing right here. And I am trying to hold this here with my tweezers without getting my fingers all inky. But you know, I usually end up with inky fingers anyway. Okay, I'm trying to remove some of this color from my brush. And then I want to go back over all of it, see if I can get it to blend just a little bit better. And we still have some purple on the brush, but that's okay. We'll go over it anyway. Actually, that may even add to this a little bit. So you can keep kind of the rough look, or you'll see as I go over this and I'm squeezing, so I'm applying some water. I apologize, it's jumping around on me because of the way I'm holding it. You can tape these in place with some washi tape or some removable tape that will hold it in place and also keep it from warping as it starts to dry. Now, I am just loving the way this has turned out. I think this is going to be absolutely beautiful once it dries and I put it onto my project. So here, let me share with you the projects that I have created with these. Here you can see the whimsical tree card. This would be perfect for Christmas time or winter time, either one. And you can also see this lovely card I made with that leaf ball embossing folder and the watercoloring the background technique. So thanks so much for joining in today. I really appreciate you watching along. If you're new here, please subscribe to my channel. I hope you have a blessed day, and I hope you'll be back again next time when I'll be here helping you to hand make with love.